evening, afternoon, morning, whatever time you're listening to our amazing conversation with Dr. Trey Childress. I am Dr. Gloria McDaniel Hall. I am an assistant professor at National Louis University, and really excited about this idea that we have to create this series that we're calling Real Talk. And it was kind of like a brainchild of mine that kind of poured out of a class that I had. And sometimes the students just create these projects or these dissertations or these papers that I know are going to make a difference in terms of equity. And so we're graced to have Dr. Trey with us today. I met him through the doctoral program, and he told me a story right before we got started, and I want him to share that about another incident where somebody thought his conversation was real.
So thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it 100%. So no, the quick anecdote that we just shared kind of offline was that I was participating in a full day professional development for a client. And this particular client, I hadn't had any experience with their teaching staff prior. So we're, essentially kind of, getting to know one another and kind of feeling one another out. And at lunchtime, it was a science teacher, and I have a science background, came to me, and it was very gregarious in how she said it. It was a pretty awesome sister. It was like, yo, man, I really appreciated what you said. It was real talk. And so
Yes.
I mean, of all, lots of people, fortunately for me, but not self-aggrandizing, many people came and told me how much they benefited from the time and the space that they had with me. But that was the one that stuck out to me, that it was the first that I shared with my wife when I got home, like, how'd it go? Was yo, real talk. If you're of the culture, you know what that means, and it means everything. And it was very important to me. So
Yes.
very appreciative.
Thank you. So I did meet you formally during your doctoral work at National Louis, and I just want you to talk a little bit about that journey as a doc student, but then like what you're doing right now and how you ended up in this space where you are. The Dr. Trey story a little bit.
The Dr. Trey, a little bit. Okay. So when I started the program, I was a principal of a charter school, and my professors, Dr. Okun, Mark Larson, Dr. Larson, Dr. Harrington Gibson were kind of our guiders, our shepherds through our cohort. And I understand that the cohort has changed since I got started, but yeah, that's who I was with. And I got to tell you just straight up, I don't make it through this program without those people. My cohort members were really amazing, by the way. They were smart. Like, I was constantly feeling like, yo, these people are crazy, like their innovation and creativity and their vast experiences, because they were coming from New York, they were from Cali, we in Chicagoland areas, so we were coming from all over to be a part of it. And so there was so much learning, and they created the space for us to kind of cross-pollinate just in across everybody's experiences, from suburban to urban to everything, curriculum, pedagogy, like everything. So,
cool.
I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to be with my cohort, and shout out to my cohort. Yes, indeed. And so Dr. Gibson was my chair, and I would, just to be transparent, how I'm Dr. Childress is feels fully attributed to Dr. Gibson just making sure that I kept up with my writing. So being a practitioner, as well as someone who's trying to finish their dissertation, is kind of hard because of all of the family man,
Yes.
wife, kids, business, and I'm trying to do this thing. And there are times where they're like, yo, I need you to write something. And you're like, I got nothing.
I got nothing.
I got nothing.
Real talk,
I
I got
don't even know what
nothing.
you want me to say.
Yes.
Right. So, this brother, Dr. Gibson, got, just stayed on me, kept with me. If I didn't write anything for months, he would just, ping me, like, hey, just checking in on you, what you got, let's check in. And it was honestly him, really kind of pushing me. Also dealing with a little bit of an imposter syndrome, not really seeing the worth in value in my experiences, and thinking it need to be kind of highfalutin, but
Yes.
not real talk necessarily.
Yes.
He definitely navigated the things that I was thinking into a space that fit into my dissertation and got me across the finish line. Currently, what am I doing? I'm the executive director of Transformations Advisory Group, which is a education consulting firm geared towards improving outcomes for all students, particularly those who have been marginalized students of color. So that's kind of our client base, and we're 3 years in September into this.
That's awesome.
Into this work, and so I'm enjoying it, and
That's amazing.
that's a little bit.
So the thing about your dissertation that made me think about you when it was time for figuring out who we were going to talk to for these segments is that you actually did a case study. And at the time, I didn't even know your case study was of a teacher who I knew and actually worked at my school as a first year teacher. But what you found about her teaching practices, her knowledge of the subject matter, the way that she interacted with students, those things that you found, like, I really feel like we could put those together and create, this is what we need is not just math teachers, but these are the dispositions we need for teachers who are successful in urban schools. So if you could just talk a little bit about what you found out through your research in terms of her math instruction, but then also what are some lessons, some big aha moments that you had that maybe you hadn't thought of before you observed her?
Yeah. So great question. So, when we think about the focus teacher, I have a math and science background, and so I wanted to do something that was going to further the field, right? And so that's in terms of a topic. I was like, okay, I need to see how I'm going to add. If you're a doctoral student, you're trying like, how do I add to the field of in depth of knowledge? And so I found a teacher, your teacher is very, very, the multiverse kind of aligning for
Yes.
a second. And she had I want to say 4 or 5 years of consecutive just ridiculous outcomes in mathematics as far as the state testing at the time. And all of her students were students of color, particularly Black students. And so I was like, what's happening there? I want to see. I just,
Right.
kind of like wanted to just sit there and understand what was happening, because clearly it wasn't happening everywhere, right?
Right.
And her data was outperforming the state. So that's kind of how I got into the room. What did I find? What I found was that she herself embodied many of the practices that I know that I found as a student, having gone to an historically Black college. And so I was able to make some connections between myself as a learner as well as what she was providing her students. And so first, I want to say that this woman, this phenomenal woman, was incredibly versed on the curriculum and the mathematics itself. And so any way that it needed, the standards and the prerequisites needed to be unpacked, she was ready to provide, right? And when she was asking questions and student would give incorrect answers, she was asking those things, very particular questions at very particular times to unpack what students knew slash didn't know, and was able to start to like fill in those gaps or anticipate those gaps when they went from, say, whole group into small group slash stations, or
Yes.
whatever she had for the day. But from a standard standpoint, she knew, you don't understand this. This is why you're not answering this question correctly. Let me make sure that I make my way over to this group and address these students, or these little micro standards that will get in the way if you don't
Don't
really,
know. Right.
if you don't know them.
Right.
So there was that. I think secondly, she had a wide and vast array of pedagogical skills, and ways that students need to experience the instruction in order to gain mastery, right? So I think, unfortunately for us in our business, is we talk a lot as teachers. And we expect them to just be able to absorb. Do you understand what I'm saying? And just kind of get it. And it's
Right.
like, no, I mean, math in particular, and in many other areas, it's messy, right? You got to get your hands dirty, and you need to be able to talk about it. You need to be able to push students to student conversations, to student to teacher conversations. That all needs to occur. And there needs to be a safe space for students to fail and
Right.
and get back up. And she provided that. Additionally, her reteaching practices didn't look like the first time, right? The initial introductory practices. So again, back to the reteaching, is what does reteaching usually look like? Because I say the same thing I said the first time.
Just louder.
I mean, I did my best the first time, but I usually do it again, right? But I say it louder and I say it slower. And no, she did not do that, right? She had a different experience geared towards the misconception, right? And so it wasn't just the standard, but it was also a process in which hopefully students were going to go through a thing to be able to understand what it is that she was trying to convey, and ultimately students, for them to be able to produce the product that she was aspiring for. And so that was obviously very important. So she had strong content knowledge and a very vast pedagogical toolbox. But I think the third thing was, which is actually the most important, the thing that I really my heart really kind of was drawn to and just wanted to understand more, was that she had the ability to form really strong relationships with her students. Like, they believed in her. She was firm and fair. But please understand, there was no games to be played to her classroom, right?
Right.
But yet and still, they understood the expectations, but they all felt connected to her, not just as a disciplinarian. They knew that she wasn't playing, but they also felt safe enough to take risks, right? And I think in math in particular, you don't want to come across as stupid.
Right.
Like, it's a trial and error kind of thing. I'm working my way through it. And students consistently navigated her classroom culture while feeling connected to the teacher and connected to other students in a way that was not an impediment to them pushing their own learning and understanding. And so they didn't feel stupid, saying something that was not correct. And when they didn't understand something, they also knew that their teacher had their back, and that they were going to get another experience either that day or another day that was going to, hook them up, so to speak, so that they were going to get those questions correct, and it was completely cool. And so I think that those foundational pieces were huge, because students felt safe, they felt secure, again, as a student to student, as well as student to teacher. But she was also actually speaking life into them from an identity standpoint. Like, you can do so much more. You are going to be great. You're already awesome. Let's figure out some things, and we're going to work those things out.
Yep.
And we're going to be where we want to be. And so it was those kinds of things that I found present in the observations, as well as the conversations that I had with students and families and coworkers. It was a constant theme of this relationship as the foundation that really spoke to me and spoke to my work. And so I was happy. I felt blessed to be able to report out what I saw.
So her work sounds exactly like the work of Marva Collins, in terms of, we send these thoughts about abilities to kids, and that actually forms their self-concept. The self-concept isn't formed within yourself, it's formed with all these messages that you receive. So number one, last two questions. First, advice for new teachers who are trying to figure out how to do that relationship piece, when sometimes it feels like it's so difficult because of, the students that sometimes will send you on a run for your money, but those are the ones who need it the most.
Oh, absolutely. I think probably the first thing I would say is don't take things personally. And it's very hard, because if you spent, the evening prior or the week prior planning a lesson, and then somebody comes and,
Just
terrorizes it and destroys it into pieces, it's hard not to hold a grudge.
Yes.
I've had it happen to me. It is what it is.
Yes.
It's hard. It's very hard. And I would say, you know what? That's not personal.
Yeah.
Right. The second is to get to know something about each student, just something, just anything that you can just kind of hold in your mind that you can ask that student about whenever you see them. Hey, did you catch the game? Hey, man, I saw an art exhibit. Hey, man, them blue Takis, did you catch them? Did you catch the blue Takis? It doesn't even matter, right? It really doesn't matter, because what it does is it says to the person, you see me.
You see me.
You know what I'm into, and you're just kind of like, it disarms everybody so that we can get after the business of teaching and learning. I think lastly is knowing that everybody's not going to get everything immediately, and that's completely fine, right? Providing space for remediation and reteaching, and that we're just going to constantly get it, I think is a huge thing, right? And so, Carol Dweck, of which I'm a huge fan, growth mindset is not about where we are at any individual moment. It's like, we're going to get there when we get there, and we're just going to continue to push forward, and providing those positive messages. Think about the last thing you didn't get right the first time. How did you feel? Right? It's like, that's a human experience. That's not a kid experience. That's a human experience. And so being able to look through things in that lens, I think offers the opportunity for encouragement and connections.
Awesome. Okay. So I usually close out my other podcast that I work on with a quote of something that like resonated with me, thinking about the person who I was speaking with, and knowing that I was going to speak to you did, again, makes me think of Marva Collins. But her quote is, let me see here, all about the possibilities of giving students the opportunity to see themselves differently. You can pay people to teach, but you can't pay them to care. So what does that say to you?
Man, it really honestly speaks to me. So it immediately makes me think about Ron Ferguson's research. He's a professor at Harvard, a brother whose work I'm endearing. And one of the things that he kind of unpacks is really the importance of, just the relationships with with students of color, and they just need to feel connected to the
Mhm.
spaces where communal people kind of feel, right? And the truth is like, students will show up for you if they know you care about them.
Yes.
It's not about the academics itself, or how they're doing on any individual test, or even how their grades are doing. If they feel connected to you, they're going to show up for you and do their best work, because they feel seen and they feel heard. And providing those spaces are essential to this work, because it provides also an opportunity, which I also unpacked in my research, is around, we don't necessarily know who we are until someone tells us.
Right. Right.
And so to speak life into a person and constantly be there, not just their cheerleader, but be like, I see things in you. Let's see how far we can push that, and see where it takes us. But I see this in you is such an important aspect of Marva Collins's work that resonates with the work that I kind of unpacked in my research, but it also resonates with my own educational experiences. Like,
Yes.
I required that because I actually grew up in a predominantly white suburban school, um, and felt actually really lost. And I
Yes.
college educated parents, and I still felt very lost in the space.
Yes.
And my grades definitely spoke to that sense, right? Until there was someone, Mrs. Smith, who I also speak about in the research, and was able to interview to be like, what was that about? You're like, what was that? And for her to unpack that for me. But the truth is I required it. I would not be here if certain people didn't intervene on my
Right.
behalf and say, I see you and you can be so much more, and I'm in it with you. That spirit, I think, resonates in spaces. I think we all need it. I'm actually it's not just a Black and brown thing as much as it is, people commune with wherever they're felt seen. It's kind of like
Yes.
Cheers. I used to love, I'm kind of an 80s, kind of person. And I love Cheers, Cosby Show and Cheers, before they used to be back to back and before Different World. And Cheers was awesome because, if you hear the theme song of Cheers, it's where everybody knows your name, and
Oh.
always glad you came.
That's
Man,
what
if we
we
could
need in
just
the
if we could just
classroom.
embody the spirit of Cheers in classrooms and in
Yes.
schools, we will be a whole lot further along.
That is amazing. What a way to take us out. Thank you so much, Dr. Trey, for joining me on today's Real Talk episode.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.